Terrible.
Please don't act like Morehouse on this thing. If you're
No,
on
no cuss.
the YouTube people can see us right now. So
Okay.
welcome to the podcast, folks. Pat Hardy sitting in for Scott Docterman today.
Big
Now we
shoes
need
to
to get
fill.
the podcast going here. All right. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. It is Thursday, March the 13th, 9:11 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Pat Hardy. Scott Docterman is on assignment in Indianapolis for the Athletic at the Big Ten basketball tournament. Pat, he got woken up this morning with the Ben Johnson news, like everybody else, that Minnesota had fired him overnight, and he had to write a story for them this morning. Obviously a good reason for him not to be on this podcast, but yeah, that's what Scott's doing right now. Very bizarre. I've never seen a school release that in the middle of the night.
No, Iowa usually does it at 4:57. That's what they did with the softball release a week and a half ago. And so do you think Scott knew this was, I mean, obviously Ben Johnson, there's been a lot of speculation, but do you think he had any idea it was coming within
It,
like the
it,
hours
it,
after they lost?
no, it seemed like most people, like I saw like some national people at the Athletic and ESPN, everybody seemed surprised because they retweeted Minnesota's news story. They put it at, I think they posted it at 111, the story
119.
itself, and then they tweeted it at 119. So they had to
119,
wait
yep.
8 minutes to get the intern up, as you were talking about. There's a funny meme on Twitter about Minnesota having to wake their intern up to post that story. Middle of the night, man. Sports just becomes more and more bizarre, man. Just, from
I
David
feel sorry.
Letterman being at Iowa women's basketball, it's just
Yep.
surreal.
I feel bad for Ben Johnson. I mean, he seems like a good guy. Everybody speaks positively of him. I remember when he was a big football recruit trying to decide between Northwestern and Minnesota. They're in the similar situation as Iowa. He doesn't have Fran's credibility because, Fran's been here for 15 years, made 7 NCAA tournaments, but they have low NIL and low fan interest right now. And their AD, Mark Coyle, he put that really saying they do what they have all the resources. It's one of the best jobs in the country. No, it's not right now.
He could
It
put
could
that
be,
out. He could
but
put
it's
that
not
out
right now.
publicly, but when he's going to hire a coach, they're going to want to see the facts. They're going to want to see what do you have? What support do you have? And that's going to be the same thing here. It's the same parallel.
I don't know exactly what Minnesota's figure is. Iowa, we've pretty much got it nailed down between 1 million and 1.5 yearly. That's what they have working with right now for men's basketball. It's not enough. I mean, it's not enough to compete with the teams that you need to compete with to get where you want to go. So it will be interesting to see I mean, I wonder if Minnesota's going to go after Darian DeVries. I mean, his season, did it end yesterday or will they're
I
below
think
500?
they
They got beat by
lost,
Colorado. They
but
got
I
beat by
also
Colorado.
saw them as one of the last four in from Jerry Mathers, who does that thing for ESPN. What's his name? Lenardi.
Oh, hasn't been the NCAA tournament?
He has them in the
Oh,
NCAA
okay.
tournament. I didn't
I didn't
think
even know.
their metrics were that good.
I didn't think they were even 500 still. I mean, I thought they. I mean,
Big 12's a good conference.
yeah, it is. I know they're way below 500 in the Big 12, and to lose to isn't Colorado near the bottom of the Big
They
12?
were like a 14 seed, I think.
Yeah, that was not. I think they got beat like 67-60. I think the score was. And of course, DeVries was being ripped on Twitter for not making adjustments in the second half by Iowa fans who are evaluating him. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably just went over that with a fine tooth comb to get advice from the Iowa fans.
Minnesota may be interested in something like it'll be interesting to
What's a
see
better
Iowa.
job, Minnesota or Iowa?
Well, I think upside Minnesota just because it's a bigger city, better recruiting base. But Iowa's been better at basketball more. I mean, Minnesota, I mean, Patino couldn't get it done. I mean, since Clem, they really have not done. Dan Monson couldn't. I mean, it's been a
And
while
Haskins
since,
had to cheat.
and he had to, yeah, and it's been a while since Minnesota's been reveling. And I'm one of the few that still loves Williams Arena. I like that. When it's rocking, it's a neat place. But let's face it, Minneapolis produces enough recruits every year. If you can just keep most of them home, you're going to be competitive. But they haven't been able to. Think about all the great Minnesota players that have gone elsewhere. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think, there are the plus and minuses for each. Obviously, being in a metropolitan area and producing local talent is huge and a pretty sizable advantage over Iowa, although Iowa does produce good players, just not at the same rate. Both arenas need sprucing up, we'll say. Because Williams
I
is a
would go with
cool little
that.
arena, but they both need to be renovated and more fan-friendly bathrooms, concessions, things like that need to be upgraded for fans. And I think one of the drawbacks for Minnesota is the competition in the city. You're competing with the T-Wolves and the hockey team
Oh, without
and all
question.
the other sports. So you really have to stand out. And they've not come close to that in a long time. But I think there's a lot of parallels and a lot of similarities just in terms of resources between the two programs. And it'll be interesting to see which school does better with if Iowa does make a change here, which school makes a better hire.
Well, and that's a good point you brought up about the competition from professional sports. Iowa, of course, doesn't have that. They push that narrative, which makes sense. But that can also backfire on you when things aren't going good because Iowa fans have nothing to dwell on right now except for the misery that's, they'll find the miserable things to dwell on because they don't have anything else. That's their team. And there's no pro team here, whereas Minnesota fans can at least have diversions. But that can also lead to apathy. But they're very similar situations. And the difference is Ben Johnson's gone. Fran is not gone yet. Fran's getting ready to play Illinois, and he's in this for the long run. They are at worst going to play in that crown thing, and I know you're looking forward to hitting Vegas hard for about a week or two, aren't you?
Yes,
I,
looking forward because I love Las Vegas. It's
I wonder
small.
how much media will go to that.
I don't
I'm
know.
guessing it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I just I like what they're trying to do, but doesn't this kind of seem like a participation trophy, the crown tournament?
It does, and it's TV generated.
It's
Obviously,
of course
ESPN has controls the NIT. I mean,
NIT.
they push that. They have the selection show, and Fox was like, "Hey, let's start our own tournament. We'll see how it goes." I mean, if they do
Yeah,
it right and they have some good games, they'll get people to watch. And as we know, because we have friends who like to sports gamble, if you put games out there to gamble on, people will be interested, and especially when it's men's college basketball. So, but I do think if I was able to spring the upset today against Illinois, big if, I think they got a shot at the NIT because I'm starting
oh,
to
I do
see
too.
them kind of being on the NIT bubble. So they got a chance to maybe move into a more high profile tournament, I would say.
Oh, if they beat Illinois, I think they're in. That would make them 18 and 15. So at the worst, they'd be 18 and 16. Yeah, I think they're in if they beat Illinois. And I mean, the thing with the crown, I think what they're banking on is they're going to fill it with a bunch of Power Four teams, as opposed to mid majors that were trying to make the NCAA but didn't. I think a lot of those mid majors are going to go more to the NIT. The crown seems bent on, not bent, but determined to have just be a Power Four showcase for teams that finish between like 10th and last place. Isn't that basically it? Isn't it?
Yeah, and I think for the upper crust, for the snooty Power Five people, they complain about how many teams get into the college football playoff. Right? We got to have SEC and Big Ten teams in, and um, one of the complaints I think about the NIT tournament is they let those mid majors in. If you win your conference championship, you get in, and I think that's what the Crown is trying to counter. I kind of like the NIT setup because those teams have earned their way in, but
Sure.
I want to at least see what the Crown's about. If I turn it on and it's bad Power Four schools playing against each other, I'll just turn it off.
Me too. I think most people will. Yeah, we got to give it a chance. See what happens. And I wonder. Rutgers lost yesterday. I mean, what a mess they've been this year. But they blew a big lead. They're below 500. So can they get in the Crown? Crown doesn't care if you're below 500, right?
I don't think they do. I think they're looking for matchups. I think they're going to try to put together the best matchups, the most attractive matchups. I don't know how you do that with teams that are like 6 and 7 win teams in their conference, but that looks to be their objective. And maybe they can find storylines. Like this is just very hypothetical. Like if Iowa was in the Crown and they brought, I don't know, what's a team that you know Drake's in the tournament. UNI, Nevada would be
Oh
interesting, for
God, could
instance.
you imagine that?
Things like that. You could set up matchups, but I don't think Nevada probably will make it to the Crown. I think Nevada's probably done.
That would be an interesting matchup, Alford going up against Iowa, and the best would be the lead up to the game, as
Oh
opposed to
yeah.
the game. The game may not even be that very interesting. But the other thing with Rutgers, the Crown would have to consider is if they, I doubt the two five-star NBA guys would play in the Crown. Don't you think they're done?
I'm
I mean,
not
Nate
sure that
Staley fouled out of that game last night in the late in the fourth, and late
I,
in the second half.
I don't want to accuse guys of anything, but I'm not sure that they went all out this year. But you're making kids play a year of college basketball, and I guess they don't. I guess they could go to the G League or go overseas, but really, just let them come out of high school and go into the NBA if they want. Don't make them go to college for a year.
I agree. At this stage, it's ridiculous to make them do the 1 year. I think they both, if you're going to get picked and you've got the money, you're fine. Whether you make it long term, if you invest your money, I think both those guys would have been picked last year. And now it sounds like they're both possibly top five.
Yeah, lottery picks. I pretty much every mock I've seen has them top 10. So that's life
They're
changing
very
and money.
talented. They're
Yeah.
very talented, but it shows it takes more than just two superstars, especially when they're young. Like Rick Pitino says, he wants men. I mean, these guys are 18 years old, they're young, and there's a difference. I mean, and I think maybe sometimes when you have youth trying to lead a team like that, you see what happens. This is one of the worst defensive Rutgers teams I've seen in a long time. Their defense was bad. And
Yep.
as usual, they can't shoot.
No, and
That
that was
Dylan Harper,
always what Peichel hung his hat on was defense. They were always hard nosed defense.
not this year. Did you watch the end where Harper threw the perfect pass to the teammate who was wide open? He could have won the game with a three at the buzzer, and he missed it. He just missed it. I mean, Harper did everything he could to get his own shot, realized he didn't have it, gave his teammate a perfect guy, and it just missed. But yeah, I think Rutgers is better. It's probably better this season just ends, move on.
No, I didn't watch it. And the reason why I didn't watch it is I don't have Peacock
Oh, that's
because my
right. I forgot
Peacock
about that.
subscription was on my Hawkeye Nation card, which is no longer active. And the folks that listen to the podcast know why. So now I have to pay for that myself, and I wasn't paying the $8. I was hoping they'd win, and I will watch tonight. And Dallas Jones and I know we teased last night's podcast with me not watching the game. It was tough for me to do an instant reaction podcast about something I didn't see. I listened to Dolphin and Bobby on the radio. They did a good job, and I followed along on the stat broadcast, so I can talk about it a little bit here. But I'm gonna let Pat take it away for the most part because he got to watch the game. And Dallas and I will do a podcast tonight after the Illinois game, an instant reaction shortly after that game's over. So check out the feed, this YouTube feed, and then we'll also have the podcast posted shortly after that. So that's tonight. They play at 5:30 against Illinois. We talked a little bit before we started recording, Pat, about last night's game. It helps a lot when you shoot well. Iowa made 11 threes at Nebraska the other day and won. They made 10 threes last night and won. You're making double figure threes. You got a really good chance to win. It covers up a lot of other maybe deficiencies.
Especially when the other team goes 0 for 8 from three in the second half, which Ohio State did. That was the difference in the game, 15-point difference. And Iowa's a good shooting team. I mean, Ohio State is not, I mean, there are like a lot of Big Ten teams that every once in a while they get hot. But if you look at Peyton Sanford, Price Sanford, Josh Dix, the best thing they do is shoot. And Fran's always had that with his players. Now, cynics can argue, okay, if it's so great to have all these shooters, why don't they do more? Well, that's a good argument. But yesterday, that was the difference. Iowa was a better offensive team. Ohio State just never really got anything going. And I thought Iowa's 3-point defense was pretty good. And then Fran said it, when they do those little Twitter promotions when they show them in the locker room celebrating. Fran said he thought that was their best defense from start to finish all season. And maybe it was. And now they're moving on. They've got some confidence. They beat Illinois. I mean, that would make them, if they beat Illinois, they'd be 18-15, right? Well, okay, now I'm getting way ahead of myself. How many more, if they're 18-15, how many win? I mean, Ohio State was supposed to be on the bubble yesterday at 18. So if Iowa beats Illinois, are they sitting on the NCAA tournament bubble despite how bad the regular season Big Ten schedule was? Are they that? Can it shift that dramatically in 1 or 2 games?
I know it's a good question. I mean, you look at the bracket right now and the quality of wins that they could get if they won. I mean, if they beat Illinois, they get a shot at Maryland, the number 2 seed. You beat Maryland, then you get a shot at Michigan. So I mean, I'm not sure. Like years past, we're always like, oh, Iowa's going in. They're either, you have an idea of what they have to do, but this year it was like they got to win it. because that's kind of what we're programmed to think in the past. But with more games now in the Big Ten tournament, more chances for quality wins, they may not have to win this thing to get
I
in.
don't think they'd have to win it. If they got to the championship game, that would be what? That would be 20 wins. They'd be 20. And look at what I mean, we're putting the cart
Oh
way in
yeah,
front. I get
I
it. I
don't
get
like
it.
tonight's matchup at all. We'll talk more
No,
about
I
it.
don't either. For some
I'm
reason,
gonna
I
try
like them
to.
better against Maryland on a neutral court than I do Illinois. I don't know why.
I'd rather them see them play Wisconsin than Illinois.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
can
like
see
the
that
matchup
because
with Illinois.
no, Illinois is more athletic than Wisconsin. Although Wisconsin is, I mean, they're a different team. The
Yeah,
thing is, though, Wisconsin likes to play fast now. They'll play Iowa style, whereas before it was always they'd always each other would try to control tempo. Now Wisconsin says, hey, let's run, let's go for it. So we'll see. I mean, they're going to have to beat good teams, but if they win tonight, it's going to just it's going to be interesting because Rob, I'm guessing 3/4 of the Iowa fan base think that Fran's done. Wouldn't you estimate that?
yeah, and I
Just
think
from
there's
the
a
polls
faction
out
of the
there.
fan base that is rooting against Iowa to win, which is twisted and warped. But we've all been
Unchanged.
sports fans. Like I've been a sports fan. I'm like, the Knicks are not good this year. They may as well lose and get a better draft pick. And I think there are
Yeah.
Iowa fans in that mode that they're convinced that Fran's going to be let go. He could be. I don't know. But they just want it to end to move on to the next stage. But they're going to play in another postseason. They're going to play in some postseason tournament after this, whether it's the Crown or the NIT or the NCAA. So even if they lose tonight, it's not over.
And he's going to ride that horse as long as he can. I mean, he's already made it clear he's in it for the long haul. He's not going anywhere. The only way he's not here next year is if they force him out. And then if they do, he wants his money and then he'll move on. So it's going to be an interesting couple weeks once this season ends. And if the more they win now, just makes it more interesting. I'm not saying it secures his job or anything, but it just makes things more interesting from a PR standpoint. And what's the other thing that's going to be interesting is um, if they do announce him leaving, the time between him leaving and hiring a new coach, how many players go? What do you think the attrition is going to be like? I've heard some people say they think there's going to be a mass exodus. I don't know. I don't have a real gut feeling on that, and I don't think any of us really know. The other thing too, though, there could be a mass exodus for a day or two. You get a new coach in here, he comes in, says the right things, and it's all love and hugs. Or it could be a new coach comes in and says, "Okay, we don't need you. We're going a different direction." So much can happen to impact personnel, assuming Fran does leave.
Yeah, and I think, if you're Beth, if you're Iowa, you need to do what's best for the future and fixing the
Yes.
program. So if that means losing some players now and, you know, bottoming out and having to build from rock bottom, kind of like what Kirk did. I mean, Kirk, when he came in, he was willing to have a couple lean years before turning it around. And maybe that's what happens with basketball. Maybe it's not, I don't think there's a quick fix for this program, no matter what they do.
No, I think winning's the only quick fix, but that's easier said than done. A new coach would they'd have that initial burst of fans. You know what I mean? Just the freshness of it and everything. But they're going to have to win before that plays. And when I say win, they're going to have to. Do you think upper division finish? Let's say they have a year where they go 15-5 in the Big Ten, but then they lose in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Does that bring more fans in the next season?
No, that takes you back to, the '06 team, that, finished in the top of the conference. They didn't win the regular season, then they won the tournament, and then lost to Northwestern State. That was a really good team and a really fun season. And Carver was rocking at the end of that year once they got going. People were back, engaged, and then
Yeah, it was. I'll make sure I remind Adam Haluska of that tomorrow he'll be on the radio. But we talk about that with Adam. He says it's one of the roughest moments he said it was just devastating. They just never expected it to happen. But I mean, and then remember Utah and those guys, they were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They were 12 and they ended up losing in the second round to Villanova. And I think that was the Nassau Bahamas in New York at the Barclays Center, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at that.
They beat Temple on the Woodbury tip-in.
Yes.
In the first round, and then they lost to Villanova.
Yeah, I remember covering that game. The little media workroom was right off the court, the Barclays Center.
Beautiful.
That's in Brooklyn, right?
Beautiful arena. They did
really
it up
is,
right.
yeah.
Great food. It was good. They did a good job there.
And that was nice because I got my niece was actually living in Brooklyn at the time, if you can believe that. and I was two subway connections from her apartment to the arena. That was a fun time. I was hoping they'd win another game. I wanted to stay out there. But yeah, it's just I think with Fran, the lack of deep NCAA tournament runs is what's hurting him more than anything. And it's just, and the other thing is, and we've talked about this, a lot of competition with the women's basketball, and you still got wrestling, so that's stretching people financially. But I think it's more of a time thing in some ways too. Basketball's on every night of the week. It's so hard to schedule. I mean, they get games on Friday, Sunday. Whereas in the past, you could schedule your life around the games because you knew they were going to be on 2 or 3 days a week. Now they're all over the place. And of course, an Iowa State fan would listen to us and say, listen to these guys making excuses. Well, Iowa State's winning a lot more than Iowa, and Iowa State's basketball fans, let's face it, Rob, they've been better over the last 20, 30 years in both sports, but
Yeah.
they've also been good in both sports. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I just don't know what Fran can do at this stage to get the fans back. And you know me, I think he deserves at least one more year body of work wise. But you got body of work and fan disconnect both competing against each other right now in Beth's mind. And I have no idea what Beth is thinking.
Yeah, whenever, that's come up where the football program has had like its valleys during the Kirk Ferentz era, I've always said to people, you bitching on the Hawkeye Nation message boards or Twitter or all that is whatever. It's not going to do anything. If you want change, you speak with your wallet, with your pocketbook, and you don't go to the games. And we've talked about the difference between football and basketball. Football is a 7 week a year
Right.
home event. It's an event. It's a social thing. It's a gathering. Basketball is not like that. And, but it's still the same concept. If people aren't going to the game, they're speaking with their wallets. They're speaking with their money that they want a change. It's just what it is. And whether that change is a new coach, which seems like the obvious thing they would be, um, I guess, pursuing by not going to the games. Um, it's revenue, it's all of those things. They're impacting the program right now. They're helping to direct necessary change by not going to the games, and that's their prerogative as fans.
Yep. They're speaking loudly and the message is clear. I mean, I think the Gazette did their, I mean, it's funny. The Register did one a few weeks ago. Now the Gazette did theirs. I'm waiting for the Quad City Times. Maybe they'll have one. But I think it was well, yeah, there's nobody left there at the Quad City. But I think it's 5,034 is what they averaged over the 18 Big Ten conference games, which ain't good. That's two-thirds of the arena empty. But what's stunning, I think it was Doc's tweet. Iowa's still ranked 10th in the Big Ten in attendance. Think there's 8 teams in the Big Ten with worse attendance than Iowa, and one of them is USC. I believe they're last. And I saw an interview with who's their little hothead coach? What's his name? Oh, Musselman. Some of the local TV guy was interviewing him after they lost, and he was bitching about the lack of fan support. And he's like, there's something about, and then he points to the court where the games are played, and he was saying, "Hey, there's our problem." It was pretty telling. You could tell he seemed frustrated. But USC doesn't have there's no interest in those games. There's so much other stuff going on out there that it's like if you watch some of their games, it's almost like people are passing through the gym on their way from one point to another, and there's a Big Ten game going on. Oh, hey, do you want to stay and watch this? You know what I mean? Like if it's like the primetime league or something, it's just bizarre when you watch their games.
Yeah, and the parallel there is USC is more football. I think Iowa is more football. It's not that
Yeah,
neither of those schools have basketball history. Iowa has a good basketball history. It's just push comes to shove, people are going to spend their money on those events in the fall and the social gatherings and football, and that's just the way it is. So, but that going in, and it takes a little bit more to succeed with basketball at USC and Iowa.
it
Um,
does.
it's not inherent. There's not inherent support there. You have to build it, and we've watched it, Pat, just kind of fall off since Dr. Tom left. There's been some highs, but from an attendance standpoint, it's not been the same since the 90s.
No, it hasn't. And there was somewhere during the latter years. You remember that
Yeah.
game in the NIT against Georgia?
Yeah.
There was like 2,700 people in the arena. No, it's been a problem for a while, and they just haven't won enough to offset that problem. When I say win enough, the 11 out of 13 upper division finishes under Fran, it sounds great, but it would sound better if it was like in the top three. I mean, the upper division's good, but there's a lot of years where a fifth or a sixth place finish isn't going to galvanize the fans, especially if it doesn't include at least a second weekend in the NCAA tournament. That's where Fran has come up short. They've been consistent. He rebuilt this thing from rubble, but he just hasn't been able to get it up to that next level to offset this apathy, if that makes sense. They just haven't won enough at a high enough level to offset all the stuff that's going on.
It goes back to the Bowlesby Alford thing, right? Taking the
Yep.
program to the next level, and Fran
Yeah.
has got it back to roughly where Dr. Tom had it. I mean, that's the level that as high as Iowa basketball's gotten in the last, 30 years? That's been the bar. So
Yeah.
can you get it to the next level? They haven't been able to. I don't know what that takes, but I think they're in a more difficult position to do it now than they were when Dr. Tom left.
Oh, without question, because of transfer portal, NIL. It's crazy. I was thinking about it watching that Michigan State game, sitting there at the press row, watching them, what they did against Iowa in that game. Iowa has not done that for 55 years. They won the Big Ten title outright with that win the other night. Iowa has not won the title outright since the six pack in 1969-70. They haven't won a share of the title since 78-79. I don't think those things really fester that much in the minds of fans right now. Now it's more NCAA. But when you bring that stuff up, though, that just gets the fans even more. There just hasn't been a lot of good stuff to have title since 70. How old were you in 70?
Three.
Yeah, think about that. That's the last time they won a title. But then you could counter when's the last time football won a Big Ten title outright. I'm asking about 85.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
40 years ago. So think about that. 60, 50 for 55 for one and 40 for the other. And that wears on the fans. And I've always told you there's always these parallels between football and basketball, because in some ways because I've had a lot of fans say, you can't compare Kirk and Fran. Their performance is so different. No, not really. I don't think. I mean, whenever football recently gets into these big games, Rose Bowl, Big Ten championships, they kind of do what basketball does in the NCAA tournament. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And, the Music City Bowl is what? That's the NIT?
Yeah, that's like
You would
winning an
say?
NIT game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Some would say maybe it's like an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. No. I mean, Iowa football does not set out to play in the Music City Bowl every year.
What's the crown? Is that like the Armed Forces Bowl? No offense
That's
to
the
the
thing in
Armed
Detroit.
Forces.
No, it's the thing in Detroit. The Crown is the thing in Detroit, and we'll just have to see. I've got a cousin that lives in Vegas. I could see her. Maybe she'll call. If she calls me and says, "Hey, listen, I'll give you a car to use for the time you're here, and you can stay at our place," because I'm sure that I know they have a really nice place. But no, I'm probably not going to do the Crown.
Maybe you can score like Wayne Newton tickets or something while you're out there.
Is he still performing?
Probably. I mean, if he's upright, he's probably performing. That's Wayne.
Yeah, you're right. I could maybe get Suter to go, although he and his wife were just there. They go to Vegas 4 or 5 times a year. So we'll see. I mean, it's fun to laugh at. I give Fox credit, but Fox is just trying to look for another way to make money. Of course,
Yep.
It's a business.
Yeah, because they're pumping a bunch of money into these. I mean, look at the TV deals they're paying the Big Ten, and when ESPN's paying the SEC, they want to get as much programming as they can. So what are the keys tonight, Pat? I mean, obviously,
3-point shooting.
3-point shooting, yeah, and rebounding, right? I mean, they lost by 2 on the boards last night. They gave up too many offensive rebounds, but they held their own, and they did that at Nebraska too. They've got to be able to hold their own on the boards.
And Peyton Sanford are both playing well. See, that hasn't happened a lot at the same time this year. But if they're both shooting and playing well, and if Price continues, you notice Price is really coming on at the end of this year. They don't need to get 15 from Harding every night. The fact that they got it yesterday, that was great. That's how the game played out. Harding shooting better from 3. But I'd still rather have Peyton, Price, and Dix taking most of their threes, and Thilwell and Harding getting into the lane and what have you. But if Peyton and Dix are playing both well tonight, I give Iowa a chance. That's the best I can say.
The end of that game yesterday was the full Brock Harding experience, man. The turnover, and you're like, and then he hits the 3. Then he hits the 3. I didn't either, obviously, but I was watching. the groan from Bobby Hansen when he turned that ball over. When Brock turned the ball, he's like, oh. But then they gave him. They were like, "That's Brock. He comes back. He lets go of the play and he hit the three. They left him wide open, man. I mean, there was nobody within 10 feet of him.
That's going to change if he keeps making threes. He hadn't shot very well from three this year. I'll give him credit. And John Bonenkamp, who's there covered it for us, he had a good story and he led with that. Harding handled it well. I mean, he handled the interview well. He said, I screwed up, but I had to hang in there. And I'll give him credit. I think sometimes he plays with a lot of confidence. And I think sometimes you can maybe kind of perceive him as being maybe a little too cocky for what he's produced. But man, I'll tell you, the kid wants to win, and you got to be confident at this level, especially if you're 6 foot tall. You got to play with confidence. I give the kid a lot of credit for hanging in there. He's had a rough year. You know he did when he put that tweet out. That kind of, I would have advised him not to do that. But he's an 18-year-old kid, man, and it's been a tough year for him, or 19, or what have you. But no, I give him credit for hanging in there and making a big shot with a lot on the line for him, for the coach, for everybody.
Yeah, it's never an effort thing with Brock. He's always playing hard and trying and doing what he can to try to win the game. It's just he gets sped up sometimes, I think, and tries to do too much. But he can be really good when he's on, and this team's a lot better when he is. And hopefully Drew continues to get a little bit more healthy and can contribute more as well. And, you get some decent guards, as we've talked about. You need guard play this time of year, and Iowa has good guards. And when they play well, they could be a dangerous team. And I think I kind of was wondering about why Fran was starting Dembele earlier in the year, but this must have been kind of what he was seeing in practice, and the kid is kind of settling in now. He's one of those guys that just kind of does the dirty work, and this team needs that.
He gets key rebounds. He seems to keep balls alive. But I'll tell you what, man, I love Evan Bronze too. I did not think Evan Bronze was going to be this physical, this quick. He is quick for a
He's athletic.
Yeah, at one point he had made 17 out of 18 shots. I think 10 of them were dunks. Yeah, he's very athletic. So, of course, they'd love to have Owen Freeman, but you make do with what you have. I give him a fighter's chance tonight. Do you know what the spread is? Have you checked?
Let me look.
Illinois 4.5.
Their leading scorer is Kasparis Jakasionovis. How do you say that name?
Could you imagine having to write that every story?
It would take me probably at least till his end of his sophomore, beginning of his junior year before I didn't have to look it up. That's usually how I can gauge how hard a name is.
I would do it the whole way through. And that's why I like Brock Harding more, because that's an easy name to write.
Yep.
Brock Harding so is Price Sanders.
Josh Dix.
Josh Dix.
There you go. Boom.
Can't get any easier than that.
All right. Let me look up this darn.
I'm going to guess 4.5 Illinois. I bet Dallas would know that spread right now.
It is Illinois minus 10.5.
10.5?
10.5, over under 165.5. So they're expecting a high scoring game and Illinois to dominate. That's a high number. Just to give you guys some reference, the other games today, Indiana and Oregon is at 11. So you guys can listen to that, or watch and listen to that soon. Oregon is favored by 2.5. Northwestern against Wisconsin. Wisconsin favored by 8.5. Purdue and USC. Purdue is favored by 10.5. So Vegas, as we were talking about earlier, the odds makers are looking for, other than Oregon and Indiana, pretty non-competitive games at the Big Ten tournament. And we know that there's usually at least one that makes you raise an eyebrow.
Man, shows you why I don't bet. I said 4.5. I never would have dreamed it'd be 10.5. But are they usually right?
Usually pretty close, and it's most people know this, but I always repeat it for the novice gamblers or people that don't gamble. The odds maker's job is to try to get an even amount of money on both sides of the bet, so they set that number what they think is going to get action on both sides, and then they keep the juice, which is what you have to pay. Sure. Them like a commission. So that's the objective, but it's uncanny how often they're like right on it. And you see it on social media and stuff where people are like, it's like a 15-point win or a 10-point win. And people are like, well, some people were disappointed with that last shot because somebody throws in like a half-court shot at the buzzer to mess up the point spread. That's why I don't gamble as much as I used to. I did as I was in college, but there were too many times where I had those moments where I'm like, oh, I was on the right side, but something stupid happened.
So when Peyton Sanford said that he's gotten death threats, do you think that was gambling related? Some
Could be.
frustrated gambler.
That's always something that I consider right away. Did you see Coleman Hawkins, his interview
Yeah,
from last night?
yeah, that was pretty sad. I mean,
Yeah.
he lost it, but he took the money, and it just
I still
as
don't,
much
and I think that can come with criticism, but there are people that just take it too far,
they
social
do.
media and otherwise. If they're emailing him, whatever they're doing to get to him, that's just hard. And it's so counterproductive to wanting a young person to do well when you mess with their mental health by messing with them on social media.
Didn't he get 1.2 million to play there?
Yeah, and
Something like
that's
that.
part of it. I was kind of looking into it a little bit. People were pretty critical of his agent because his agent wanted the money out there so he could get more guys to represent, and it makes sense for that. But then you put the student athlete in a real shitty spot.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. I felt bad for the kid. I'm guessing he's probably thinking, man, I maybe should have. Kansas State did not have a great year, did they? I mean, they're not, I haven't
No,
followed them.
no,
I
they did.
wonder if there's part of him wishing he would have stayed at Illinois. You imagine him with Illinois with the talent they have there now? I mean, that would be quite a roster. So yeah, no, it's tough. I hate seeing these kids suffer. And everything is so visible now because there's cameras everywhere. And there's people that think they should know everything what you're doing and what have you. But yeah, no, the sports world is it's a lot different than when we were growing up. I'm not saying it's worse or anything. It's just different. I'm so glad there wasn't social media when I was in freaking high school and college. Cameras and videos, I would probably not be sitting here right now.
Yeah,
I mean, think about it. Everything now is on. I mean, there's cameras everywhere.
yeah. You always know you know, and the seasoned uh popular sports figures and athletes and coaches know because you watch them like when the camera's on them on the sideline or the bench, they're always talking like this so you can't read lips. And that's why, because
Yeah.
no matter one little slip up, man, and you're viral and people are just tearing you a new one.
Well, look at LeBron's exchange with Stephen A. Smith. I mean, my God. I mean, I don't care about that stuff. I did not realize that Stephen A. Smith signed a $100 million contract with ESPN. I don't listen to the guy. More, I think happy for him. That is great. I'm just amazed at what sports journalism in some ways has become. That's the way, I mean, think of all the great writers and stuff that ESPN got rid of, and now they must think that's where it must sell, what have you. But
Don't
I
you
mean, you
think
could.
that's partly a commentary on society, not to get too
Oh,
deep
without
here,
question.
because they're
Yeah, yeah.
consuming his content? I can't
Everybody,
stand it.
everybody wants shock jock, own you moments, gotcha moments, beat down the opposition. And I think Stephen A. Smith probably loved it. LeBron just gave him more
Yep.
popularity. And, I mean, LeBron was basically telling him to leave my son alone. That was the father part and what have you. But it was everywhere. And, people were reading his lips. And it was just, but yeah, there's nothing that's not on video anymore. Can't do anything, it seems.
Nope, be careful out there, kids.
Yes.
So what do you think tonight? Do you think they can cover that 10.5?
I
How do
think
you
they
see
come.
it? How do you see this game playing out?
I think they're going to cover the 10.5. I think that for some reason, I think they're rallying a little bit behind Fran. And and so much of it is just whether that 3-point shot goes in or not. Tonight, I have a feeling it's going to go in for a while, but I think eventually Illinois will wear them down. And the other thing, Illinois is healthy now, right?
Yes.
Isn't that they've had some injuries, but their two big foreign players are both healthy. And
Yep.
that Will Riley, who's from Canada, he's really good. Illinois just got a better talent, better, and Brad Underwood's a good coach. And I've always thought he looks like the bank robbers from the Flintstones. Um, and they haven't had the kind of season I think their fans. They lost a lot of. What they lose 8 or 9 conference games.
They are. They don't have their
They lost
record.
8.
Let's see where Illinois is in the net. Iowa that's right now in the net is 63. It moved up 2 spots yesterday with that win. The biggest mark against Iowa, Pat, 2-14 in quad one games.
Yeah,
2-14.
they
For
were 0 and
reference,
10 at one.
Penn State is 2-10 versus quad, and we know what Penn State is. But Iowa's against 2 and 3 quads. Iowa is 9 and what is it? Where are they? No, there's 8-1. against 2-3. So they have that going for them. But that 2-14, like we were talking about, if they can make a run here and maybe not win it and get in, that's the obstacle they would have to
That'll work against
overcome.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see what Illinois is. Illinois is 14th in the net overall at 20-11, and they are 8-9 in quad one games and 6-2 in quad two games. So, yeah, quite a bit of difference there.
Well, always playing for a seed. I mean, if they make a run in this thing, they could be as high, I would imagine, as maybe a 4 seed. Maybe you think?
Yeah, they're 14 right now, and I know the net isn't like a direct, line to what the seeding line is going to be, but it plays pretty heavily into it. And if you look at it now, that would make them what, a 4 seed at 12, because your top 16 would be 4 seeds.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, they beat Iowa very handily. They should win this game, but we've seen crazy thing happen before, and we just don't know what. Maybe we're going to watch something special unfold here over the next couple of days with this Iowa team rallying behind Fran. But at some point, also, talent and depth takes over. You can only do so much. You know, that stuff with Dr. Tom, that 98-99 team, that team was pretty good. That team had some good players. And I mean, so yeah, they rallied behind their coach, but they also had good players. I mean, they had Joey Range as a freshman coming in and wanting to fight the guy from UConn. Remember that? What was his name? Kevin. Remember that? They squared up. They squared up. They were ready to go. So yeah, no, like I said, I think Iowa covers. I see Illinois. I'm going to go Illinois 83, Iowa 70, Iowa 75, 80, or no, I'll go no 87-79, like an 8-point game.
Yeah, that's about right. I think it's under 10, but I think it's just kind of maybe middle second half, last 8 minutes, Illinois kind of imposes its will, gets some stops, and is able to pull it out. Who do you like in let's look at some other games here before we go to commercial and come back and talk some softball. How about that Indiana-Oregon game to kick us off today? Who do you like there? Those are two dangerous teams.
Wouldn't surprise me either way. I don't have a gut feeling either way. Both those teams are in the tournament. I mean, Indiana's in the tournament, aren't they?
And there's talk about Woodson not leaving now. People are saying maybe he's not going to leave. That would be hilarious.
Did you see his quote after they won that last? He goes, "Maybe I'm leaving. Maybe I shouldn't be leaving or something." Oh, he's pimping the fans a little bit. But, I would probably pick Oregon, but I would not be surprised at all if Indiana won.
Indiana's got a lot of talent, man. They do.
They do have a lot of talent. And if the big guy goes off inside, I mean, that's going to be an interesting game. I'll look forward to watching that.
You give Northwestern a shot against Wisconsin or USC a shot against Purdue?
Not really. I give maybe USC a little better shot. I think Northwestern will play slow, and they'll try to slow Wisconsin down. I think they'll have some success doing that, but unless they come out and make like 15, 23s, I just don't see it happening. I'm amazed that he got 17 wins off that. I think this has been one of his better coaching jobs.
Not happy.
We talk about Freeman and Iowa. They lost more than what Iowa lost. They lost two of their top players, and they've still stayed competitive.
Yeah, he was not happy last night, Doug Collins, with the accommodations.
Well, he said the Big Ten's out to get us, and Doc was all over that, too. Doc wrote that story.
He said the rooms were sweltering, 85 degrees and no air. What type of hotel are you staying in with no air conditioning? Seriously, where is that?
I mean, and we've stayed in some stain-ridden hotels.
And may he rest in peace. Even our good friend Steve Batterson would want air conditioning in his hotel.
Yes, he would. He was the king of finding great frugal deals the Quad City Times owed him so much for the amount of money he saved on. I miss him. You bring him up. I miss him being around the beat. He was such a stabilizer, man. God rest in peace, Steve. The beat needs you. And he was old school. He didn't, he wasn't pushing his brand. He would
have been at the men's basketball tournament, but he would have made sure somebody was covering that softball thing yesterday.
Or he would have been doing it from there. I mean, he remember how he could multitask? He'd be covering an Iowa basketball game and writing like an Illinois high school wrestling sectional story at the same. He was incredible.
Yep.
He was the hardest working sports writer I've ever worked with, and it's not even close.
Agreed. Yeah, I think about it. We've gone down to St. Louis for youth volleyball twice this year down Avenue of the Saints, and whenever I pass Washington, I always think of him and think about him, and we do miss him, and we miss I'm not going to get into the landscape of local journalism anymore. We'll talk about that a little bit on the other side when we talk about softball and what media might look like a little bit in this state right now. But
I say one thing before we go on break. I want
sure,
to the Bryce Miller situation. I
yes,
mean that I know you put out a tweet just for the I work we both worked with Bryce at the Press Citizen. We've known Bryce for years. And I know Rob, you're closer to Bryce than I am. You guys have stayed close. But yeah, this is horrible what's going on with him. He's fighting cancer out in San Diego. I mean, the best thing about it, he's got a lot of people supporting him and caring for him. There's a GoFundMe if you want to help it. I just wanted to send my thoughts and prayers to Bryce and to his family and to his friends that are impacted by this. Because, man, like Fran will tell you, cancer sucks. It
it
sucks.
definitely
And
works.
and I'll tell you what, that's one thing where I admire Fran, and they've done so much for cancer. But like Fran says, there's so much still left to do. You see this Bryce stuff. This hasn't been going. This hasn't. This it's still a nasty disease. I mean, how long ago did he get diagnosed? It hasn't been that long, has it?
If it's been a year, it hasn't been much longer than that, from what I remember. And he continued to work and has continued to work through it. But it was, I think the diagnosis was challenging from the get go,
Yes.
and things have just, with this disease, things take a turn for the worse. It pops up again. You feel like you got it under control, and it just says no and comes back.
Yep.
It's horrible, and it's
And it ain't
heartbreaking for
cheap.
me. No,
And
it's
it's
not
not
cheap.
cheap. But no, I just wanted to send my thoughts and
Glad you
prayers and
did.
let our listeners know to do the same thing. Bryce could use your support, and so there, I just wanted to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I thank you for doing that. If you guys do follow me on Twitter, you can check it out. I think I put it on Blue Sky too, but if I didn't, I will do that. It's a GoFundMe. If you have the means, he and his family certainly could use it, and we certainly would appreciate it. Let's take a break here. I'll do a read, and then we'll take a break and come back and talk some Iowa softball. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you so much to Systems Unlimited for the support of the podcast, and even more importantly, the great work it's done in our community for over half a century. Let's hear from a few more sponsors now. Pat and I will be back on the other side to talk a little Iowa softball. Hang in there. We are back on the Hotspot podcast to let you know switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch, right here in Iowa, can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated, formerly of El Banditos. Perez Tacos, excellent food, live music on the weekends. Check them out. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Weekend's almost here. We got a bomb cyclone coming tomorrow through Iowa City, I hear. Some crazy winds coming in tomorrow. So if you're out and about this weekend with the nicer weather overall, be careful out there. Pat, I don't know where we want to enter this story, what the entering point here is. Iowa softball. You want to give a recap, just kind of how the timeline on this and how we got to where we are, and kind of get us to what you were able to learn yesterday in talking to the softball players.
Well, for me, it all started when I got into the radio station a week and a half ago on Monday. Today's Thursday, so 11 days ago, they told me that somebody had called the station and said, "Hey, there was an incident with a softball team down at Fayetteville, Arkansas. Have you heard anything?" and we hadn't then. But then, of course, I call Iowa, and one thing led to another. Iowa acknowledged off the record that an incident had happened. They were investigating, and then it got sent to HR, and that's when I knew, okay, well, this will probably lead to a Friday news dump because I know how they do things. And in fairness, Iowa, they can't comment publicly other than what Beth did. But what happened was some girls chose to kneel during the national anthem. Then this had been an issue. It sounds like the team had been battling with whether how to handle this. And the head coach, former Green Beret, U.S. Army, I mean, 20 years of service, highly respected. I get all that. I think he came in here thinking that he was going to basically kind of control the culture more than he found out that he was able to do. These girls did not want to adhere to his wishes. They wanted to continue to kneel. And instead of figuring out a way for everyone to coexist, he he didn't like it. I don't know if he left on his own or if Iowa showed him the door. We will probably never know the specifics of that. But whatever the case was, they chose to move on. I mean, they're moving on without him. He's not the coach anymore. And I've had some people, I took the photo over there yesterday. Why are you doing this? This isn't news. Hey, when a Big Ten coach leaves because he's mad about how the players act during the national anthem, that's news, whether you want to agree or not. That is news. I was surprised that there weren't more news outlets over there yesterday. I'm not trying to push either narrative. I stand during the national anthem proudly. I always have, always will. But I'm not going to tell other people how to act during the national. It's none of my business. I mind my own business, and I knew the moment I posted that photo, it was going to just turn into a political left versus right, and that's what it is. It's just, and it's funny. I've got Iowa and Nebraska fans attacking me. They've joined forces together, working together to attack and to push. And that's, they can push their narratives and what have you, but it's news. It's news. And I was happy for the girls that they were able to get a win yesterday. I mean, remember, this team didn't make the big, they've been through a lot. Their head coach is out right now for health reasons. Renee Gillespie, they're on their third head coach. This head coach now, he came in as the pitching coach. He's from New Zealand. And think about it. Now he's running this program. And but this issue is never going to not be divisive. It's just going to always be something that tears people apart. And I mean, some of the stuff that I've had on my feed, it's just nasty. Some of the stuff, deport them, get rid of them, jail them, kick them out of school, take away their scholarships. And I knew that was going to happen. But you still gotta cover it. It's news.
It's without question news, and we could debate where it belongs in the newspaper or on a news site. Is it a lead story? Is it front page news? It's news. There's absolutely no debating that. And yesterday, after this story, after the coach gave an audio recording to the DI, and that story came out, this Monday? Was that Sunday or Monday this week?
Oh, the DI story came out 21 minutes after Iowa made the release on Friday.
Friday, okay. So all media people knew that Iowa softball would be playing Wednesday. The university let Pat know that they would discuss and respond to what the coach said in his audio recording. So there's really no excuse not to cover the story. I understand resources are diminishing in media, and there are fewer people to cover things. But to not have any TV or and I talked to somebody from the Des Moines Register today who agreed with me that it's a story. And if you're in the media, I don't know how you wouldn't think it was a story. And it should have been covered more. But thankfully, Pat and the DI and John Steppe from the Gazette were there yesterday. And what was the vibe you got from the players? How did they feel? Did it feel like there was good chemistry on the team? I know that's hard to tell, but
I didn't sense anything. I actually stood pretty close to where they had their post game. I didn't sense anything, but a really neat moment was in two former players. I think one, I don't want to say her name if I don't know for sure, but two former players, I could tell they were kind of hovering around the dugout while the team was having their post game meeting. And I don't think the Iowa personnel knew who they were. So then I heard them, I was eavesdropping a little bit. I heard them say, hey, we're two former players. We're alumni. We're proud alumni. Can we talk to the players? for a minute when they're done. So when the players got done with their meeting, they came out of the dugout and gathered around these two alumni. And I just listened. They just basically said, "We are so proud of you. Just so you know that you have a lot of support nationwide, globally. There's so many people that are proud that you guys are standing up for you." It was a really neat moment. And I sensed camaraderie. I sensed a lot of togetherness. I mean, and most of the team didn't kneel. I mean, I counted two in the line, and then the shortstop, Sujin Berry, she kneeled on the field. That's what Stevie thought there might have been three in the line. From my photo angle, I didn't. You know me, I'm
I
not a
think there were.
photographer.
I saw the Gazette photo by
Did it
Jim.
show three? Because from
Yeah, I
my
think
angle, it looked like two.
there
So
was
it was either
one.
three or
The third one was closer to home plate, farther away from where you took your shot. So she was kind
okay.
of. I think she was
So
kind of
four
shielded off.
altogether. Then. So
Yeah.
four, not that you're not, but that's a minority. But it sounds like the players who are standing, like Jenna Young, the second baseman, she stood right next to Sujin Berry. And I think if she had any major resentment, she would have maybe put a little bit more distance between there. But I didn't sense anything. Now, of course, it helps when you just won a doubleheader, too. It'll be interesting if this team goes through the same types of struggles they had last year, and the kneeling continues to be an issue. That then you don't know what can happen. Losing can tend to change emotions, and so we'll see. Because this team did not have a good year last year, and they've got some new players in. And they should beat St. Thomas, which they did. St. Thomas has been on a roll, though. They've got some good players. That Ella Cook from City High, she could play at Iowa. She could
Yep.
easily play at Iowa. So it was a nice win, but we'll have to see more as the season progresses because it seems like Sujin Berry and them are determined to keep kneeling. And I think these alumni were telling them, listen, we support your freedom of choice. That's what they were saying. And you could just tell that it meant a lot to these players. At least yesterday it did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's always going to be contentious when this happens, and like you, I'm I sincerely appreciate the coach's service. I mean, Greenberg, that stuff is I can't even imagine, and they deserve our thanks. There's no doubt about it. Having said that, they do not have and I got into this, I'll bring this up here, with Dan McCarney on my Facebook page the other day. Dan was pissed off, and that's why I'm wearing my City High shirt. So anybody from City High that's mad at me for taking a shot at a famed alum, I don't have anything personal against Dan. I've known Dan since I moved here and did a story on his parents and Bobby Elliott's parents, Bump Elliott, about their relationship when Iowa and Iowa State played. So I've known Dan for years, interviewed him through the years, but he was not happy with when they kneel. And that's the thing. Don't kneel, do it. So there are people that want protests out of their vision where they don't have to see it. And that's not the idea. And that's what I tried to explain to Dan before. Now, sadly enough, pour went out. We're no longer Facebook friends after this incident, but that's the rub, right? There are people that won't budge on that. Don't do it during the national anthem, and there are people like, we do it during the national anthem because it brings attention to it, and we're not doing it to disrespect the military. We're doing it because the military gave us the freedom of free speech and protest. That's what the rub is. I am on the side of the latter, but I understand people that don't like it. And it's important. If the Iowa program, football, allows kneeling, if any of those programs allow kneeling and you don't like it as a recruit, you don't have to come here.
No, you don't. And it's interesting. Somebody reached out to me on Twitter and said, if they continue to kneel, drop the program. And I'm like, well, football players had guys kneeling, be careful what you wish for. And then I think he told me to F off or something like that. I think Xavier Wamka knelt before every game, didn't he?
Alvin Bell kneels. He's an assistant coach.
Yeah, and Deontay Craig.
Yeah, I mean,
but it just got to the point with football, it wasn't a news issue anymore. We didn't pay it. Remember that when it first started, we'd have our binoculars seen. We'd write down who was kneeling, and we'd be the first one to try to tweet it out. Now it's not even news anymore. With softball, it's news because the coach quit. Had the coach not made this an issue, we would never have known about it and never would have been a story. But he made it an issue. And I just thought by sending that audio to the Daily Iowan, it was so one-sided. I just think you needed to get the other side of this, and you saw Sujin Berry said she had no comment on what that other guy. She wouldn't even refer to him by name, and she stayed away from commenting on him. And what they kept saying is, "We have each other's back." That was the phrase they kept using, and she was saying, "The girls that stand, they still have my back." And the head coach from New Zealand now, the new acting head coach, he basically just says, "We believe in personal." This guy's from New Zealand. Now he's caught up. Think about that. He's caught up in
Yeah.
this stuff now, and he knows they got enough issues on the softball field that they got to deal with to have this become a lingering problem. I hope this just moves. Just for our listeners and readers, I'm not going to be at every game taking photos of them kneeling. I'm not going to make this a big call. I didn't write a column on this. I just reported this as news because Hawk Fanatic. I mean, we're a Hawkeye news site. If there's we don't cover everything, but we try to. And this was a pretty big story, and it's going to be interesting to see how well they play. I mean, this Carl Golan, this is like a job audition for him now. If he can show some life with this team and they rally behind him, it'll be interesting. He may get the job. Who knows? But then Renee, we don't know Renee's situation either. I mean, she's only supposedly gone for what I have not. They've been very vague, and that's her choice, and
That's
I get
fair.
it. But they said that she's gone for the 2025 season, and maybe she will. Maybe she will come back, but Renee's about my age too. So so it's going to be interesting. I hope that Renee is able to come back, and then I assume if Renee comes back, Carl, unless he gets it, would stay because he was hired before she took her leave of absence. So obviously she was the one who hired him. So there's a connection there. That's the one thing you forget about this, Rob, is the head coach is out with health reasons. I mean, it's just been a ton that they've had to deal with, these young ladies.
I wonder if she's had any involvement in this because she brought the assistant coach in that became the interim coach.
She also brought in the players that are kneeling.
I
And I'm not
know.
blaming her. No, I'm not. This is no blame. I don't know, but it sounds like she's got her own issues and she's been away. But don't quote me on that. I don't know for sure. But like I said, I just hope she gets through her medical issues and can come back next year. Because like the plan was to have her, Ryan Levin, and then Carl Golan as the pitching coach. That was their planned staff. So we'll see. And they've got Carl, and they've got, I can't remember the other assistant coach's name but they've got two assistants. They'll be fine. It's not rocket science. They'll have enough guidance. This guy's been doing softball all his life. So we'll see. I just hope they can show some improvement because get the national anthem aside, they got to get better. The softball team to not make the tournament last year when you're the host, that's not a good look. And if they struggle this year, Rob, again, the anti-anthem people are gonna pounce on them and make fun of them. That's what's gonna happen. You set yourself up for criticism when you do this.
Yeah, you look at softball and volleyball at Iowa, both really not competitive in conference for the most part. So it's just kind of puzzling because I'm not saying they could fix things with just in-state kids, but they're losing really good in-state kids for both of those programs. And obviously with Renee being sick, that doesn't help with her trying to recruit. And it's just kind of wonky with the situation they have. They lose the guy who was the interim coach. I wonder what they're doing now to even be able to build in recruiting when you don't even know what your staff is at this point. It's just not a good situation.
No, it's not. And the one thing softball has over volleyball, though, is when Gail Blevins was here,
Oh,
they
yeah.
were seen. But that's also been a while. That's been over 15 years, and I don't like the way Gail was treated at the end. I think that was
There's another situation where it was
one of
off the field.
worst handlings. Yeah, it was not good. More off the field issues. I guess the roster was divided. But I just think Iowa could have handled that better. I think Gail deserved better. But they hired Marla Looper, and it just didn't work. They gave her 8 years, I think, too, and it just steadily got worse and worse and worse. And then I thought things were going better with Renee, but then last year was a significant step backwards. So, and now the anthem issue just complicates things even further. But maybe this team will rally and cling together. But eventually talent takes over. There's only so much clinging and rallying you do. Eventually you got to be better than the teams you're playing.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the softball situation, not to be too philosophical, is kind of a microcosm on society right now. When you go to work, right, you're going to have people of different and the opinions have become so much stronger in this country about what is the right thing, what's the wrong thing, so all of those things, and you have to kind of navigate that around people these days, and I
Yeah.
think it becomes even more difficult in a situation where you have so many kids from different parts of the country on the softball team, all the players on the football team, all the sports teams. You're going to have people from different backgrounds and who have different beliefs. And the lines have been drawn so clear now that it takes even more to understand somebody who has a different opinion. And it's important to take the time. It sounds like the softball team at least has found some ground to exchange their feelings, and it's kept them together. It didn't sound like the coach wanted to be a part of that.
No, the new acting head coach, Coach Golan, he's allowing that to
Yeah.
happen. Whereas this guy, Brian Levin, it seems like he wanted it his way or the highway, and a certain amount of players just weren't going to do it. They were going to stand for their, or I shouldn't say stand, they were going to stand up for their right to kneel, if that makes sense. And they weren't going to budge on that. It became a battle of wills. And like I said, again, we don't know how this meeting went during the week, how the meetings went between Iowa and Brian Levin. Did he claims in that DI audio thing that he didn't officially resign. So that gives you the impression that Iowa moved on without him. I kind of think that his purpose in that audio message was to kind of make himself out to be the victim. Didn't you sense that?
Yeah, it was a lot of finger pointing at other people, but he wasn't really taking any responsibility for his involvement in it. It was basically, this is what I want. If they don't like it, too bad.
Yeah. And Iowa said, well, we're not going to go that way, it looks like. And
And he
if it
also
was a,
seemed like he was trying to, and maybe there are, I don't know if you guys, in that setting, I'm guessing somebody who opposes their kneeling probably wouldn't want to talk about it. One of the teammates that didn't agree with it, but he almost made it seem like there was a decent amount of the teammates that didn't like them kneeling. And I
yeah,
don't
there
know
may
that.
be. They made two players available. They made sure. I'll tell you, Matt Weitzel was there, and I was so glad he was there because it just made things easier. But they made sure they gave us one of the players that kneeled. That's what, and then they gave us another player who didn't kneel but didn't have issues with it. My guess is the players that would maybe complain about it, they were maybe decided, maybe that's not the best thing to turn this into one of these things publicly. If a player who was against it would have come up to me and said, "Listen, I want to talk," I would have gladly given that side of the story. Yeah, but that they were never. They basically gave us who they gave. We got the head coach and two players.
And I mean, if somebody, if one of the teammates was like, listen, I understand why they kneel. I don't like it. I have members of my family that have
I have
died
no problem with
in
that. No,
that's a
fine.
perfectly legitimate take or view on the situation.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with that. And like I said, I stand proudly for the national anthem. Always will. I've been around you. You stand.
I stand, I do. That's me.
I'm just not going to tell other people what to do. And the nonsense on Twitter, that I mean, it was funny because there were some people talking yesterday. Though, yeah, it seems like everything's gone pretty well. People are moving forward. People are accepting this. And I look at White, so I'm like, those people haven't been on Twitter, have they? Not that Twitter is a real reflection of society. I don't buy that. I mean, because so many of those accounts, you don't even know who they are. The cheap shots and I mean, you just thank God Elon hasn't taken away the block option. You think he ever will take it? Didn't he want to take away the block option?
You
So you could
changed it so
block.
you can see people that you block, but they can't comment. I don't know what that stuff. It's all a huge waste of time. Social media, other than promoting content and having useful dialogue, which is rare these days, anymore, Twitter is it's just a place I don't really want to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like what the message boards were 10 years. You know what I mean? They're kind of sort of similar in that regard. And you use it to push your brand, you use it to push your business. I get it, but yeah, and I knew this was going to be a firestorm after I posted that photo, but it's news. You got to do it. It's news. I don't care what the people say. This is ridiculous. But it's news. But like you said, we're not going to dwell on this. We move on. And if the players continue to kneel, hopefully they they will stay accepted, and the teammates, they will stay together. But like I said, it's going to be interesting if they start to lose.
I think what could happen, and if they are close, and if they do have good chemistry, I think what will happen is they'll talk about it.
Yeah.
You can avoid it, but then maybe that builds up animosity when you're not talking about it, so to speak, if you're just ignoring it and putting it in the corner. But hopefully they've had good conversation. And if there is somebody or multiple people on the team that are against it, they should be allowed to express why they're against it. And the people that are kneeling should understand that too. And that's the way you grow, right? And how people become better people. Not what he was doing, not what he was trying to do, which was impose his will. It didn't sound like he was willing to continue to work through this. They tried, but it wasn't going to resolve if he wasn't going to relent.
No, and I wonder though if most of the other teammates are like you and I. They stand proudly but don't get all worked up and bothered by the ones who don't. Maybe that's it. Maybe the most of the teammates are like that. I would have gladly, but we did get one of those. Yeah, the left fielder who her last name's Roman. She stood. I mean, she stood, but she didn't have a problem with the others. So maybe that's a majority of what the team is, and maybe there are one or two that are adamantly against it and didn't want to comment. But I would give a stage to anybody. Everybody deserves the right to talk. Hopefully, they can figure out a way to make this work moving forward and just go from there. Because, like I said, yesterday, had they lost that doubleheader, it may have been a little different tone. There wouldn't have been near as much enthusiasm but they won. They're 16-8, but now they got to enter in the Big Ten. They got Indiana, and then they get to play a team called UCLA in softball. How do you think that's going to go?
UCLA is pretty good at a lot of sports. UCLA, the Pac-12 teams that came in for softball and baseball are going to have a field day in this conference.
They are. And it was funny. We were interviewing Coach Golan and talking about, I can't remember what we asked him, but he's like, guys, we got Indiana and UCLA coming up. He goes, we don't have a lot of time to dwell on this stuff. He goes, we're not worried.
And that's the right mentality. That's where their heads need to be.
And he also said, I'm not going to comment on somebody who's not here. He handled it pretty well. And it was funny. Weitzel talked to them all. This is a tough situation for these people to be in. They want to be careful not to say the wrong things because they are representing the university. They are, but I thought they handled it well yesterday.
Let's a little history here too. If you remember back to 2017 when Trump was calling Kaepernick a son of a bitch and people that were son of a bitches for kneeling, we asked Kirk about that because there were college football players kneeling, and he was adamantly against it. He was not going to have it. And I know that rubbed some of his players the wrong way, and that was during a time where we found out later there was some separation on the team, some division on the team. He went through 2020, the summer, had some really, from what all accounts were, very tough conversations during that time in the locker room. And they had some guys that walked out and people were pissed, but they worked through it. And then once they got back on the field, Kirk listened to people, and some of it's self-preservation. He probably had to, in that situation, relent to a degree, but they've since then let players kneel, as we've said. Kelvin Bell, players, they're doing fine. It hasn't done anything to rip their team apart. There are certainly guys, and then you hope, as I said earlier, people have conversations. Maybe there's a guy from somewhere in rural Iowa that goes up to some Xavier Wonka and says, why are you kneeling during the national anthem? And Xavier Wonka can say, this is why. Well, why do you do it during the anthem? Because I want to bring attention to this. Mm-hmm. And the other kid may not agree with it, but at least he understands, or at least he's learned why. Rather than just getting on social media and calling people sons of bitches and being angry about it. Again, I know people are probably, hippie Rob, Woodstock Rob, wants, but that in a society where it seems like everybody's dividing more and more, why not have the difficult conversations and try to keep things together and understand each other? And hopefully that's what happens with the softball team. And for all the people yelling at the softball team, the same thing has gone on for the last 5 years in your football team. People are kneeling. The head coach
It's
has
just
had
not news anymore.
Yeah.
And Kirk has learned that compromise is part of self-preservation. It's funny, I just looked at here's a response. You people sure love free speech until it becomes inconvenient for your worldview. That's a big part of it. I mean, free speech is easy as long as everything's being said is something you agree with. To me, you got to compromise. You got to allow both sides to issues to
And we're
speak on those
seeing it on
things.
a bigger level, right?
Yeah, but Kirk
The
learned.
Palestinian protesters, right? The people,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. So this is
Mhm.
just a part of that. As I said earlier, it's a microcosm of society.
Yeah, and I'm the Palestinian stuff. If there are people out there pushing pro-Hamas stuff, get rid of them. I don't
Yeah.
want. There's a big difference between pushing pro-Hamas and supporting Palestine.
Yes.
Palestine. There's a huge difference. But if they're doing pro-Hamas stuff and helping them, get them out of here. I'm all for that.
Agreed.
But yeah, Kirk learned. Some of it he was probably forced to do too. But Kirk, he doesn't seem uncomfortable with it now. He's had to give in a little bit as he gets older because society is changing around him. But he has learned that compromise is a big part of self-preservation.
What did he
And
say? What was it kind of his talking point narrative, however you want to put it, when he was asked how that stuff went on in his football program?
he said he had a blind spot, didn't he?
And how do you fix blind spots? You look, you talk, you ask
Yeah.
people why they're doing what they're doing, if it's different than what you believe. And he did that, to his credit.
Yeah, no, and I do think the culture is better. I mean,
Yes.
you see guys like Deontay Craig, you see, but like even Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy didn't leave here because of the culture. He left here because he couldn't, oddly enough, he couldn't get on the field. And now he's in the NFL playing running back. That's such a strange. But Tyrone Tracy liked it here. He was fine here.
Yep.
But that was a decision. No, I give Kirk credit. He has evolved. He had to evolve. But this softball thing will eventually become old news. I mean, but like I said, the coach made this news. He's the one that made this an issue, and I think he wanted it to become an issue. I think he was out to I'm not saying necessarily bring harm to the Iowa softball program, but he definitely wanted his message out there to be heard that the Iowa softball program plays favorites and they don't favor his side of the deal. That was his whole message.
And as you found out from response to covering the story, there are a lot of people that are on his side and agree with the way he approached this.
They had a guy heckling in the stands yesterday during the anthem, and I think Burka and management had to go up there and tone him down a little bit. There was some elderly fan up there, and he was yelling during the anthem. But I mean, yeah, I get it.
How is that not disrespectful? How is it people on their phones during the national anthem or eating or others? How is that not disrespectful?
Oh, I think that's way more disrespectful. Yeah, my dad never used to care if people didn't kneel. What would piss him off if people like eating, talking like at a basketball game, they're not paying attention and what have you. But no, that's disrespectful. Kneeling, you're doing something like Sujin Berry said. She does it for personal reasons. I didn't ask her why because it's none of my business. If she wanted to share that information, she would have, but she didn't. But she just said she does it for personal reasons.
I love America. I love this country, and I love it for everybody. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, me too. I love it. Wouldn't want to live Well, I guess if I could get a nice oceanside home in Bermuda or something, I'd maybe think about going there. But no, I love this country too, and we got to figure out a way to get along better. I don't want to get on my soapbox here, but sports is a nice outlet, but sometimes society seeps into sports too, and that's what this was all about.
And I think we're going to see more of that moving forward, just because society is just encroaching on all walks of life now, and it just seems like that division of two sides is becoming more clear, and people. It seems like any topic is like a philosophy and a belief. You have to be on one side or the other instead of maybe listening to both sides.
And social media makes it so easy for people to feel that they're more important than they really are. It makes it so easy to just talk snark. And it's just, like I said, social media it's got some good to it, but man, I think it's brought a lot of bad to society too. It really has.
It has, no doubt. And we just got to keep pushing forward here. You can't give up. You got to keep doing the right thing and doing what you think is right.
Fran's saying right now to his players, don't you think? You think that's what Fran's saying?
I do a little scouting right now in the hotel ballroom. They do the walkthroughs and stuff like that. So hopefully, although with Connor and Butler down there, Iowa may have a little advantage on having places to practice.
Yeah, and I wonder if well, they're at Madison Square Garden, aren't they? Butler?
Yeah.
And I think Margaret's out there with Patrick. I wonder if she's going back and forth. That's got to be tough.
No,
But I'm
probably
guessing
not.
she's with her. I'm guessing she's with her two sons over Fran, and Fran would understand that.
Yeah.
And Butler had a nice win yesterday, and Patrick played well. He had a nice game. I'm happy to see him smiling. It was nice to
Yeah.
see him smiling. It's been a rough year for Butler.
Yeah, it has, and it's good to hopefully they can make a run. Hopefully Iowa can make a run, and we'll see how it goes tonight. 5:30 is the scheduled time. Iowa and Illinois, and that is on the Big Ten Network, so I can watch it tonight. Again, action gets underway at 11 a.m. Central Time, about a half hour from now, with Indiana, Oregon,
On your
Northwestern.
instant reaction pod with Dallas, we'll have John Bonenkamp's game story, and I'm going to probably write a column from home. So we'll have at least 3 content items. And then I don't know if we ever got video. Did they ever send video from? I don't see anything
Let me
posted.
check my email here.
We'll make sure we get video posted tonight too. Last night with the softball stuff, it was just hard. We weren't in communicating with each other, and then you couldn't get on Peacock. But tonight we'll have a lot better coverage. But John Bonenkamp is there covering it for us, and I'll tell you what, he got me that game story pretty quick. I mean, he didn't mess around. And it was a good story too. It was just it was the perfect game feature type story. He kind of led with the Harding turnover and whatever, but no, it was good. We're lucky to have John there covering it for us.
Definitely check that out on hawkfanatic.com, where you can also find the softball story we just discussed. It'll be one of the few locations you can find it. You can also see it at the Gazette and the DI. Those were the 3 news outlets that were there. And
do you think the Register follows up on this, or do you
they
think
should? I hope so.
I mean, yeah, because if I'm the Register, I maybe now try to advance it by maybe talking to a player that is against it, but is allowing it to happen. But maybe they're not going to make them available either. You can, but we'll see. Like I said, I was surprised there wasn't more people there. A lot going on. I get it, but
Boys state basketball. I know the conference tournaments are going on for the colleges and all
and
that.
Staffs are getting gutted, Rob.
Yep.
TV, there's not as many employees left.
Very sympathetic to that.
I respect the Gazette for having somebody there, and the DI. I mean, the DI's all hell. They had a photographer that was there before the game taken, and I heard him say he was a freshman in high school, and I think he told somebody he was 17 years old. This kid he was shooting the game, and he was all over it. So no, the DI does a really good job. They do a really good job of covering the. They've got good kids that work hard, and they
got a good guy running the show over there too.
They do. They pack those kids into those vans and they drive across the country together. It's incredible what they do.
Yep, and we need them with a lot of traditional media going by the wayside and reducing staff. School newspapers are big. Think about some of the stories that they've broken. The Northwestern story, right?
Yeah.
The student newspaper.
And they do have an advantage. They live amongst the people that we only get access to through the university. They have a decided advantage. And sometimes they make that work.
Support those kids. That's a good thing if you want objective journalism. And I really believe there are people out there that want objective journalism. I know there are people that aren't.
And you joke about, it's a DI, they're just a homer. Well, one of their reporters has already said that Fran and Kirk both need to go.
Yep, time to go.
Said, let them hit the road. So they're not just a homer network.
Yeah.
They got a kid who's got some guts. He basically said that Kirk's in danger of doing what Hayden did, staying too long. And didn't he also just recently say, Fran, you're out of here.
Time to go. Time for change.
That's his opinion. That's not easy for a 21-year-old kid to do. I give him credit.
No, didn't Tim Dwight go into the DI newsroom once unhappy with it?
James Kramer wrote that column about
Matt Sherman. Yeah,
he called it like something tomfoolery or whatever. Dwight went into the office to confront him. I still tease Tim about that. I think that's funny. And Kramer ended up working for the Register. I don't know what he's doing now.
People are reading. That's good. It's not good when a football player comes into the office, but at least you hit a nerve and maybe.
Remember, J.D. Hill came out to the Press Citizen looking for me one time. Or were you? I think you were there, weren't you?
Yeah.
But luckily, I wasn't there. I don't know what I had written to piss him off, but he wanted to talk to me about something because I didn't write a lot about the kids, but I had done something, and luckily, I think you were there to calm him down. But I was not there, thankfully. The last thing I want to do is be dealing with an angry J.D. Hill. That's a long time ago.
From like 25, 30 years ago.
I know.
There's people listening to this podcast that weren't born yet.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
He's talking about J.D. Hill, former
Father of
NFL.
Khalil and Hakeem.
Yep.
Two very good athletes.
Very good athletes at
Hakeem
City
Hill's
High.
still one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen here. And he was 200-pound running back, long jumping 24 feet.
Yep. Incredibly good athlete. Khalil was a really good receiver, All-American return.
He was good at Iowa. Imagine if Khalil would have played on some better teams.
Yeah.
He played during the rough years and was still pretty good.
There were a lot of good players on those teams. Matt Bowen, Liddell Bad. There were good players on those teams. They just weren't collectively good because they
didn't have enough. No, you're right about that. So,
all right, folks, that'll do it for the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Yeah, it was good. It was good. We got to talk about some different things that people won't discuss elsewhere. So hopefully people enjoyed that. Hopefully you enjoyed the basketball game. And again, Dallas Jones and I tonight, 7:30-ish, 8 o'clock in that range after the Iowa-Illinois men's basketball game. We'll be here to recap it on an instant reaction podcast. So join us, won't you? All right, folks, have a good weekend. Again, be careful if the weather gets crazy tomorrow. And I'll be back to talk to you tonight after the game. You can catch Pat and the guys on KCJJ tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. And then the podcast for that will be available on this feed as well. So we hit you with Hawkeye content 5 days a week, most weeks here on this platform, this podcast, the Hawk Fanatic Podcast. So we keep you knee deep in Hawkeye. So please check us out, subscribe, like, and all that stuff. It helps us immensely, and we appreciate it. All right, I'm out of here. Say goodbye.
Bye. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.